Hey guys, and welcome back to Betwixt the Books. I'm Michaela, and I was originally going to talk about my favorite fanfiction that I read this year, but I did the math, and I finished 524 fics this year, and it's taken me a little bit longer than I had anticipated to go through and piece out which ones were my absolute favorites that I wanted to talk about. So instead, today, I wanted to talk about some of my honorable mention books from last year. I actually read more books than I was able to talk about on the channel last year. The last couple of years, I've been reading books and generally talked about all of them. Either they were books that I was reviewing with Gretchen or books that I read and brought to reading roundtables. I read more books than I, talked about in videos. And while last week I talked about, my top books, my 5-star reads, I wanted to talk about a couple of the books that I read that I really enjoyed that were in, the 4-star range that I think a lot of folks will still really enjoy, even if they weren't my, absolute favorites of the year, that I haven't had a chance to talk about before now. Like last week's video, I'm going to go through these in the order that I read them, not ranked in order of, which one I liked more. So I'll talk about the rating that I gave it when I get to that point, but it's more so talking about them chronologically. Some of these I did read at the very beginning of last year, so I might be a little bit fuzzy on my thoughts and feelings. I should have made a video when I read them, but I didn't, so I'm here to talk about them now. The first book I wanted to talk about was actually one of my more anticipated reads of the year, which was Stag Dance by Torrey. I believe I talked about this when Gretchen and I were talking about some of the upcoming releases that we were looking forward to for the year. I wound up giving it 4 stars. I did read it. I did pick up a copy. I enjoyed it very much. This is a collection of short stories, all with trans characters. Some of them are sci-fi-ish. Some of them are more realistic stories. For me, I think the thing that kept this from being a 5-star was that all of the stories were following characters that I struggled a little bit to empathize with. And I don't necessarily think that all characters need to be empathetic characters. And I do appreciate the representation of flawed trans characters. A lot of times minority groups only get representation when they are the most positive, best versions of themselves. And these were definitely following flawed characters. But because every single story were following characters that I struggled to empathize with, that were making choices that were so incredibly selfish, it did kind of keep drawing me out of the narrative, just personally. That's a me problem. I feel like a lot of people would still be able to empathize with these characters, and it wasn't that I wasn't able to empathize with them at all, but I definitely, because so many of them were making choices that I personally struggled to see why they were making those choices other than just being selfish in the moment, which again, totally valid. People are selfish. It took me a little bit out of it. But if you are a person that wants to read some gray moral characters, especially queer characters, to interact with the trans and queer experience in an interesting way, all of them had very different perspectives. And I do think that Torrey Peters' writing is beautiful and very evocative. So if that sounds like something that might interest you, definitely add it to your list. Again, 4 stars, better than the majority of the books that I read. I just didn't have a chance to talk about it this year. The next book that I read was also a new release called Feast While You Can, which was co-written by Michaela, Clements, and Onjuli Datta, or Datta. I gave this one 4.5 stars. This was a haunting horror / monster book. I had initially picked this up and I was trying to see if I could fit into a video idea I had about hunger and sapphic fics, because there was a lot of sapphic fics, not just this year, but in general, that come out that have hunger as a theme. This one follows a young woman whose family is kind of cursed. They wind up interacting with a monster that lives in a cave in their hometown, and they have to sacrifice someone, or one person in their family has to sacrifice someone to the monster. And we follow this one girl as she is being haunted by the monster. Definitely a horror book, definitely an interesting take on a haunting, because it's not just like a ghost, but it is like a almost like an eldritch being, and the ways that that being corrupts this character. Um, Also a book that has some interesting things and some gray morality going on. And there is a sapphic romance at the heart of it, although it's more of an interesting take, as her love interest in this case used to have a relationship with her brother, and also the choice to have their relationship would be detrimental to the growth of that love interest, as far as we can tell at the beginning of the story. I found it very interesting, and it was definitely like a good monster story. Again, I gave it 4.5 stars. I think the thing that held it back for me was that I didn't 100% love the ending. I understood why it happened, but I'm not sure that I agreed with the way that it ended. So that very much could be a me problem, but you might love it. And yeah, it was a very good monster ghost horror book. So if it's something that sounds interesting to you, definitely pick it up. The next book that I wanted to talk about is The Haunting of Room 904 by Erika T. Wurth. This is an Indigenous horror book that follows a young woman who is kind of a psychic detective. She gets hired by folks to help them like cleanse objects or hauntings that they are experiencing. This like psychic nature that she has started after her sister dies in a strange haunted hotel room that has links to a weird cult that's going on. The driving factor here is that she finds out that the next victim of this cyclical sacrificial room haunting thing that's going on with this hotel may very well be another member of her family. And she's trying to solve what happened to her sister before, and also to prevent what is going to happen to the next folks that are going on. Very like good mystery horror, and an interesting like little take on the haunted hotel room trope. I gave it 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. I wanted a little bit more horror out of it, I think. There was a couple of creepy scenes, but a lot of it was more detective work, going and meeting people, interviewing people, getting in some sticky situations. And there was maybe one too many subplot points that were going on, including but not limited to like a weird thing going on with her ex, a weird rivalry that included some racism that was going on. I didn't think that the topics that were being brought up there or the discussions were bad necessarily, but just that it kind of muddied the book a little bit for me. It was like one too many things going on in this shorter horror novel. But at the end of the day, I still really enjoyed it and gave it 4 stars. So it might be something that's worth picking up for you. The next book that I read was another book on my like most anticipated of the year list, which is The River Has Roots by Amal El-Mohtar. I gave this one 4.75. I think this is the highest rated book on this list. It just barely missed out on being 5 stars, and that almost entirely is going to the issues that I had with my experience because I read it on audio. It was a very short novella. It is a fairy tale story following 2 siblings that grow up on the edge of a fairy wood. One of them winds up being murdered by someone in their town, and we follow her sister as she tries to figure out what's going on with her sister and why she disappeared. It is very lyrical, very beautifully written, and it has beautiful illustrations within the text, and like the physical book is a beautiful book to have. And I think they tried to represent the amount of like quality that went into the physicality of this book with the audiobook, because it does also have like music and sound effects going on as you're listening to it. And as someone who cannot listen to audiobooks on their normal speed, any audiobook that has that, the sound effects get garbled so much when you speed up the book. It sounds awful. So if you are like me and have like ADHD and can't listen to slow audiobooks, it's not going to be for you. Like I wouldn't recommend listening to the audio on this one. If you're a person that listens at like 1.5 speed, I think it would be fine for you, and it might even be 5 stars for you if that were the case. Because I struggled so much with the listening experience of this one, I gave it 4.75 stars. Again, beautiful book, definitely worth picking up and looking at. It's super short. If you like fairy tale stories, definitely worth a read. And again, the writing on this one was beautiful. I believe this author was also one of the authors of This Is How You Lose the Time War. So another very popular book, and their new release here. So yeah, definitely one I think a lot of people will really love. And the only reason it got docked points was because of my listening experience, more or less. And then the most recent book that I read on this list that I wanted to talk about that I haven't talked about before is We Do Not Part, which is the new Han Kang translated text. It was translated by Paige Anya Morris and E. Won. This was beautiful. I gave it 4.5 stars. I have read, I think, every other Han Kang that has been translated, and I have loved every single one of them. Han Kang, I think, is one of the most famous Korean authors that is out in the world right now, so, you know, if you were already interested in something like The Vegetarian, this is definitely another one to pick up. It follows a woman who has been struggling. She gets a call from one of her friends who is now in the hospital asking her to please go to her home on Jeju Island to take care of her pet bird who has been left alone. And it's sort of dual or overlapping narratives, what is happening in the current timeline, the interactions that she has had with this partner and friend. They make documentaries together, and then also some of the history of the island of Jeju, which is an island off of South Korea, that includes a massacre that happened at one point. So like Han Kang does, weaving Korean history and sort of the scars and personal hurts that are very real and still very poignant in South Korea, into what is the modern struggles of women in Korea at this current point in time. I loved it. I think the only reason I didn't give it 5 stars, again, I listened to this on audio and I struggled a little bit. I maybe wouldn't have struggled if I had a physical copy to read, because these narratives are kind of overlapping with each other. Like, even on the same page, they overlap. It was a little bit hard for me to track in the audio. I don't know that I would have had that problem if I had a physical copy in front of me. So again, this might have been a 5-star read if I had read it physically, but because I was listening to it, I struggled a little bit and it wound up being 4.5. But the writing, sentence level, beautiful. The story, important, poignant, interesting. The structure, interesting, once I was able to sort of wrap my head around of everything that was going on. And definitely one that I think is worth picking up if you like literary fiction or translated fiction. There you have it. Those were my 4-star honorary mentions. I wanted to talk about these and I didn't get a chance to on the channel this year. I think I actually looked back and they were all new releases this past year as well. So topical reads as well, something that you may have missed if you didn't pick them up previously and might be coming out this next year in paperback. They also have been out for a little while at this point, so the library holds might not be so crazy and you might be able to get a copy of them that way as well. Let me know if you've read any of these or if you have recommendations based on any of these books that I might enjoy. And I will hopefully by next week have my fan fiction together to talk to you about that then. If not, I will talk to you guys again soon. Bye!